Hello there, out there, people. Okay, COT, when you guys hear a theatrical version of a specific melody, you know where it came from. That means you can have it, copy it, distribute it, do whatever you want to do. They can't get you for that. Hey guys, I wanted to speak to you guys about somebody asked a good question earlier today dealing with being affected by certain things, but I have to give you a real scenario here about radioactive particles, what they are, and some of the radioactive material like uranium that we use to power these nuclear stations that we have all throughout the world. They work on the premise of, hopefully you can hear me okay, they work on the premise of decay, which means radioactive material like U-235 and so on and so forth, plutonium, which is a byproduct of uranium, they work on the premise of heat, which in fact there's just to put it short, there's an electron imbalance in these nuclear materials, right? So they naturally put off a type of heat, which they also cool or control the reaction by way of graphite or water, which slows down that reaction so they won't spit out too many neutrons all over the place. But they decay, they release heat. And of course, the boiled water, which they have in a locked type of system, once it's exposed to air and it can't escape, it causes steam running these steam turbines, things of that nature, right? But there's a problem. So that water can reach very high temps, and it won't, because it's encapsulated, because it is in fact pressurized, it won't turn into a gas because it is in fact pressurized. It's a pressurized system. When the water's released, of course, it releases as a gas mixing with the air. So you're looking at water temps 200 plus that will not, it's just not turning into a gas. When that steam condenses again, it's reused. So they have to pump in water to cool off this reaction, all right, which is fission. It's fission when the neutrons start to be, when they're coming out of these nuclear materials. But the electron and the particles in the ionization is what we're going to talk about, because there's some conflicting things out there. So if you have a basis on what in the world is happening, you can better understand, what we're facing here. Because everybody's looking externally for some type of calamity, this, that, and the other, and there are certain scriptures that just they normally capture a person's attention, and it makes them say, "What? Wait a minute. This doesn't sound right," or this, how is this possible? We come across scriptures like that all the time. But when you're dealing with radioactive materials and talking about uranium-235 isotopes splitting, right, which is fission, heat is a continuous process again of this reaction, or that's a chain reaction when you're dealing with nuclear material. And of course, they control this stuff by that reaction, the splitting of this material through a process called, they call them moderators, right? Anyway, this water itself cools off the uranium in the process of the uranium with the decay and everything else. But if the water temp gets too high, right? Or if the uranium, new electrons are introduced into the uranium, then we have a real problem. We have a runaway reaction that cannot be moderated, right? So imagine some radioactive particles, which is nothing more. Radiation is nothing more than high-speed particles or high-frequency particles. So if they are in a type of runaway status, these particles, they can begin to do damage to a host of things. They can also cause this control mechanism of a chain reaction in every nuclear reactor to fail. And what I mean by that is that they won't be able to control the process efficient to a degree where it's usable, right? They'll start losing control, and then you have what's called a meltdown. Now, that can happen with the introduction of a few, right, energetic particles coming in, going straight to the ground, penetrating our atmosphere, which is why everybody ran up to, which is why they're in the North and South Pole. You can't have a shielding of a planet called the magnetosphere, which everything originates in the poles. You can't have that unchecked. It's important to understand that. It's also important to be able to maintain that and to take control of that if something were to happen, because you don't want to have meltdowns all over the place. So now, many people are talking about gravity waves and particle waves and things that come into this solar system. What they're not discussing is a natural event that will take place with the nuclear reactors, right? Because nobody's talking about the nuclear reactors. No one is looking into, not yet, but they will. Well, I can't say no one. Of course, there are people looking, but they're not sharing it with the public. And so people are not looking at this correlation between the nuclear reactors and what's happening in the atmosphere already, because the failure rate or the process or the task of cooling down and controlling these reactions in these nuclear reactors, I'm telling you, many things have changed. It's almost like a struggle that people are undergoing, these scientists are undergoing, trying to encapsulate. You know, most of the uranium, what do they use? Ceramic uranium oxide, right? Which, and that's, that's about, I'd say about how many tons? 70 tons, 70 plus tons of material, enriched uranium is used in the core of a reactor. And so they're using this stuff. So what would happen if particles began to be introduced into the core material, causing it to heat up maybe 10 degrees higher than normal? Because one of the greatest tasks in a nuclear reactor is to keep that stuff cool by pumping in cool water, right? You have to pump in cool water continuously. And then the hot water, of course, is recycled, and then you have more cooler water coming in there. But can these heavy particles that they have just told everybody, amazing what the date was, right? When they come out and have this major announcement, they know what they're doing. They're covering themselves, but it is so obscured from the public by way of, the public is far too, I guess mystic would be a good word for it, but they can't see the simplicity of what could actually cause these reactors to go into a type of meltdown mode, right? Here is the scenario. Just like the auroras, just like the nuclear centers in the Arctic, the polar regions of this planet, where you have the British and U.S. and Russian and even Chinese scientists working, singing Kumbaya the entire way, right? You guys remember 1955, Operation Deep Freeze, right? And that was to establish that was a cover for folks, and folks thought that they were doing one thing, like up there trying to save the penguins, when in fact, that was a gateway to a permanent military occupation, right, of the polar regions. Now, why would they want to do this? I know people's minds are in space and everything, but let's look at the planet here real quick. With the planet, that's where weather for this planet is produced at the poles. How many of you know that? And you know what's so funny? That's also in the book of Enoch. No wonder they took that out, because they didn't want people to understand the dynamics of the earth, but the weather itself, right? In the book of Enoch, it calls them portals. But the weather itself is basically controlled from the Arctic or polar regions. And so who sets up at the polar regions? We did. All of science did, with a military industrial complex at these poles. Doing what? Some of the experiments in the polar regions. Let's go ahead and go over some. As they were learning about the magnetosphere, right? They were also starting to play with nuclear weaponry and nuclear tests in the polar regions. They used Greenland for cover to like a pilot program for what they were going to do at the poles, and they established massive infrastructures at both poles, right? Now, no public individual is going to go up there and step foot on that land without some type of certification and approval of those who are already there. So whatever they're doing up there, using that term, whatever they're doing up there, you're not going to find out about unless you're invited to see. And even if you're invited to see, that doesn't guarantee you're going to absolutely know. Because a lot of people argue about, and this is why when people start talking about HAARP and all these other things, you see, before HAARP was actually working, there were several other projects at the poles, right? They had one project, there was a 21-mile antenna, and it would let off very low VLF waves is what it was doing, and they saw the reaction as it went around the earth and came back to the opposite pole. And so they can absolutely affect the weather. In fact, from either pole, they can cause extreme weather. They can cause no weather. They can induce a drought. They can cause cities to heat up and to cool down, right? The reason why they have so many forces down there in the scientific community, in all the military forces down there, is so that no one individual can do that, right? But they know they can. They know they can. Now, let me tell you this: the poles have something to do with CERN, with Kennedy. I'm not talking about conspiracy. I'm telling you the truth. Now, I know a lot of people have heard about Admiral Byrd. I would suggest to you, don't even think about Admiral Byrd. If you go that route, you're going to go to a dead end. There are so many documents out there, real things that have happened out there that will give you a good picture of what's been happening out there. I mean, you guys are smart, You're not like the people used to be. And so the cover story of protecting penguins and all this, that, and the other, they don't work. How about the ice chunk that they had video of? That was in a perfect square. I mean, it was perfectly cut. The problem was, it was, 11 and a half miles, 11 and a half miles from corner or from side to side, a cube. Now, who cut that cube out and with what, right? That's why there are launch stations at the poles, right? You know how NASA has the Kennedy Space Center and all these other launch facilities? Well, they have some at the poles. You can't see them, nor will you know about them, because you can't go in those areas. But they have them up there. In fact, they used to train most of the astronauts who would go into space. Some of the ones that are up there now, they take them to the poles to introduce them to what they say is a harsh environment, this, that, and the other. But some of that, they build these large health packets when they go up there and they come back, right? So what in the world do they know that people don't know? Where, for one, where the magnetosphere comes out of the poles and goes all around, you have a dead spot there that's open to space, wide open to space. You put an antenna up there and transmit something, there is no atmosphere to protect it. It's going straight out. Another thing, here's what they believe. They believe this a long time ago. It's not recent news. This is a very long time ago that they stumbled across this back in the 40s. They believe that somebody, well, let's just say a group of maybe the ancients or something like that, absolutely knew how to induce things upon the face of the earth, right? Now, that was back in the 40s that they established all these things. To 1955 and forward, 1970 being the cap of everything they were creating up there, right? Massive underground infrastructure. There's no way anybody can go up there and discover anything like that without them being invited. And then lately, a lot of people went up there, right? The key, they say, to humankind is in the polar regions. It's in the polar regions, but also the control and the centralized piece of control for a world governmental power is in the poles. It's a fallback position. It really is a fallback position. So what these guys have done is that they're building up these facilities. Switzerland and the other facility they're lined up mathematically correct to actually do an amplified feed of the magnetosphere to collapse or increase it. In essence, they have taken or influenced our magnetosphere around this earth, and they had to have bromine, other things in the atmosphere to go ahead and complete that experiment. And so chemtrails, right, though people think they have something to do with HAARP, I kind of disagree with that. In fact, HAARP has another important mission, and they do scientific research. But how would you know if a portion of the atmosphere was missing already? See, throughout the test with all the nuclear weapons and everything else, and when they moved them underground, that was one thing. But when they went to the poles and they began to do high altitude explosions up there, the tests up there to see if they can expand or decrease the aurora effect, which is in essence a bunch of particle collisions taking place, but the magnetic field and the dynamics in the poles is absolutely astounding. You're looking at, first of all, an endless amount of power in the air. Do you know that? The Earth is this instrument that produces an enormous amount of power, right? Per foot from the ground. You're talking thousands of volts potential per foot off the ground, right? They've been harnessing this to run their little toys, super experiments. And because of the cold, they had one experiment. They said, hey, guys, we're going to take a bunch of food up here for the world. Just a bunch of foolish stuff that at the time people understood that they were going to use the polar regions as some type of a storage center for the food of the world, some type of humanitarian project, right? But they collected the money from it, the machinery and everything else, but they have no food. And what they've been doing up there is continuing the military-industrial complex goals for this entire world, because mankind really does think they own this planet, and so the scientists of the world have gotten together to literally control it. Literally control it. But in so doing, many things surfaced, right? And a plan is underfoot. And because the leaders of what you don't know, why did China's president and all these communist countries, they're all holding hands, talking on the telephone. Have you guys noticed? They're friends, all of them. China, America, Asia, Europe, right? South America, all these guys holding hands. Why are they doing that? Because while you're thinking of one thing, they're doing something else, right? Now, with the weather phenomena, these guys have already set something in motion. The clock is ticking. There's a spiritual aspect of it. But what I'm telling you is this. With what is inbound and building, right? Believe me, they're going to try and save their own cabooses. They have to be there. And because they're out of time too. They have to do what they have to do. They're not going to hide certain things because you're not going to ask questions. All those leaders went to the polls. You would think people would say, well, what'd they go up there for? Nobody's asking. Why is no one asking? No one's asking. Do you ever, do you see anybody writing into CNN, Fox, or anything asking them, why have the leaders gone up there? How big is that the scientific community at the polls? Why do we have war when these guys are working together? And why are the presidents of each country, why are they knowledgeable what's happening up there, yet they have the rhetoric like they're about to blow each other up? Why blow each other up when you're working together at the polls, right? Part of the black budget, every country is missing money. It's gone to the polls. You would think it'd go towards some type of military advancement, this, that, and the other. But in general, in summary, not in general, in summary, these guys have been doing what they have been doing, and they're going to fulfill a portion of biblical prophecy by what they have been doing at the polls. Because here's one piece of what they know concerning protection. The radioactive particles that are coming from space, of which they tried to cover themselves through this conference they had, saying that heavy elements are being detected, right? Gold, lots of gold being detected in space, these heavy elements from explosions taking place out there, right? Heading out this way, coming in this way, because they have Earth-based detection systems also, which are detecting the same thing. But what they didn't tell you is these are high-speed particles. What is that called? Radiation. And when they bombard certain objects, they knock the electrons. They either add or take away the electrons of something, ionizing everything. Now, that's a charge when you ionize something, right? It's a charge. But what it's doing is charging the surface of Earth, because these ingenious individuals have tampered with things for so long. Now they have to attempt to control certain things, right? CERN is big in this. So listen, gold being the key word here. What they didn't tell you while they have their experiments, because they're going to try and save their own behinds. Remember, they have to be ready for the approach of the Holy One and 10,000, right? 10,000 holy ones, and Christ Jesus is coming back, and they think they're going to stand up to him. They think they're going to stand up to him, right? What? No, he's not on the deep stuff, Glenda. We're not talking about the deep things. We're talking about the surface things, of which every single president, they do know about this. Now, there are a lot of things a president's not cleared to see. He didn't have the security clearance to see all things, nor can he do everything he wants to do. He has a specific function, right? A specific function. But back to what I'm saying, these guys are trying to save their own behinds, and they're going to protect themselves from large pulses of radiation that are inbound, right? Now, what does radiation do to the living cell? We cover this, right? Fast-moving particles pierce living cells with enough energy to knock electrons free from the molecules that make up the cell. When this happens, and by the way, that's ionization. When this happens, when molecules are missing electrons, they disrupt the function, because you have a bonding, rebonding, repelling going on at the atomic level. They begin to disrupt the functionality of a normally functioning cell. And when that takes place, you have a mutation. That mutation is then inherited to your children, right? So it's changing flesh, but it's not coming from where you think it's coming from. Fukushima is not your issue, right? That's not your issue. We have a lot of nuclear reactors leaking. I can assure you that Fukushima is just one among many who have caused some problems. And they offset this by GMO foods, right? These special crops, these special cows and chickens and everything else. Cancer rates are through the roof. You know, one of the, now make no mistake, listen to me. The majority of the cancer is caused by radioactive problems, It's not caused by, it's not chemical, this chemical introduction like you would think. This is from radiation. It's from radiation. And they know the difference. Just like they know that some of what they unearthed in Egypt a long time ago, they're finding cancer on mummies, positively identified as cancer. Ancient bones and people and everything else, cancer, 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 all over the place. Then it goes away in the archaeological records, and then it comes back. So some type of cycle comes around where people are just having cancer, people are dying out, these diseases surface, and then they all go away, and then they come back again, and then they all go away, and then they come back again. Why? Why? Because the same way our sun has cycles, so does the center of this galaxy have cycles. If our sun is at the center of our solar system, and this solar system travels around the galaxy, then I can assure you the galaxy has seasons also. The galaxy does. So our entire solar system also has a season, right? So here's how it works. Normally, in our galaxy, you'll have a system like ours with one sun. But having one sun is not what's normal in our galaxy. Having two or more suns is normal in our galaxy. Unfortunately, you don't see the twin sun too often. So it may pass by every 50,000, 100,000 years. Right? But that's not even the problem. The problem is because of this new place we're moving into, right? Let's call it one of the wings of the galaxy, highly irradiated with stuff popping all over the place. It's going to cause the sun to start sending off these, what's going to look to you to be sparks are going to come off the sun. You're going to see this with your eye. Listen, the sky right now is so cloudy. Stuff is all in the sky. I mean, it's hazy all over the place. It's going to continue to build. And you're going to start seeing these sparks or white spots come off the sun. And people, you can't really notice them now in the daytime because everything looks distorted, right? But at nighttime, when the sun is beginning to set, right? That's when you get your best picture of the sun. I would suggest everybody go back and get your solar, if you want to see that, go get your, during the that solar eclipse, they sold these plastic glasses, the paper glasses, not the real ones. Cut out a little piece of that paper, make a hatch on the back of your cell phone, and start observing things yourself. Stop relying on other people and these NASA optics to see what you can see from the ground, because you can see that from the ground. If it lets off a hot spot from the ground, you'll be able to see it. There's no mistaking that, right? People will begin to see this. The sun it's already obscured. They have filters through Soho and all these other things. I'm telling you, it's obscured. And that is digital imagery, which can be filtered, right, within microseconds. So something could be really wrong with the sun, very different. They're not going to tell you. Because they're not going to tell you that the sun right now has burned up a lot of its material. They know that through responses and optics because they know that something is going on with the helium in the sun, that the reaction is different, and the entire spectrum of light is putting off is different. They know this. It feels different to your skin. It's actually degrading your roof faster. You remember when shingles wouldn't get too old as fast as they are now. Everything is getting old very fast. Have you guys noticed that? Your materials outside get old very fast. Has anybody noticed? That's something common you can see. That happens with radiation. Do you not know that radiation causes materials, it looks like they age faster, and the reason why is because it breaks down the molecules faster. That's why. It's not some kind of magical trick, right? Radiation will knock electrons out. It'll destabilize a molecule. It'll ionize it. And when that happens, right, some of the biomaterial begins to degrade a lot faster than normal. All right. So we have a problem even in the earth. We have, number one, a lot of people are sterile more now than ever. Now, that's one thing most people don't check for to see if they're sterile or not. Have you guys noticed? Lots of people are sterile. Where's that coming from? How in the world are so many people sterile? They're sterile. Now, we have sterilization and we have cancer. Guess what those are? Those are radiation symptoms. That's what those are. Radiation symptoms. People are getting these with bug bites and stuff like that. Long time ago, you got a bug bite, no big deal. Now, there's something different with your skin taking place. Your skin is sensitive to lots of stuff. Those of you who like to go into the sun, your skin is sensitive to lots of things, and you don't know what's going on. People are waking up with bumps on them that won't go away, right? Because one of the radiation symptoms is to have a slow burn, like, right? Looks like something bit you or something like that, but in fact, it's from those particles interact. Anyway, it's a burn that's slow to heal. How many people have something in their skin that's very slow to heal, but you're seeing it more and more and more and more and more? And then they sit there and they blame this. Well, it has to be some of the stuff you're applying to your skin. No, because it's happening to animals too. Now, the animals don't go around using Johnson & Johnson, do they? They don't do that, right? They don't use Johnson & Johnson, colognes, and all this other stuff. And just in case you don't know what I'm not talking about the domesticated animals. How about that one? I'm talking about the real farmers who are starting to find skin problems with their animals. That's what I'm speaking of. The horses that have something very close to radiation sickness because they're in the sun a lot. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. The bird problems and the fish problems. So we have all these things right there in front of our faces, but we can't discern them because we're highly interested in something else. All that implies is that, and you know what? It was advisable during Fukushima for everybody to get something to detect radiation. Don't worry, you have that in your cell phones. But to detect radiation, how do you stop the radiation though? You have to get rid of the nuclear material. How do you do that? You can't. We're going to have to pass through it. And when you know it, all the dinosaur bones are irradiated. But what they didn't tell you is most of the other skeletons they find in the ground, the ones that are not as old as the dinosaurs, they too are irradiated. The Smithsonian, ladies and gentlemen, normally gets hold of all these things, right? The Smithsonian is not privately owned. I hope you know that. I hope you know it. In other words, we have a radiation increase that's very obvious, but people can't discern it. They can't discern it because they have no knowledge of things like radiation, right? They have no knowledge that cancer rates are flying sky high. People are suffering from something common called organ damage with no cause. That's another symptom of radiation. It's increasing. It's getting worse. Worse and worse and worse. Right? So definitely something strange is taking place, right? And then you have all this interest in the North and South Poles. And then you have experiments like CERN that really are not working, but they're at breakneck pace trying to accomplish something. And then you have places like China who are about to fire up the artificial sun. And then you have places like Europe who are responsible for Star City. They're going to create a star on the earth. The way we see energy is about to change. They're going to have no choice. That in combination with the geological changes, I'd say we're changing pretty good. It's a shame that Kennedy died right before. Not speaking about ETs or anything, but his death was connected to the polar regions of this earth. Polar regions. Now, he did warn about those who would have power at that time because they were also at the polar regions. Now they have a permanent foothold there. And the dodos, they can't help, mankind cannot help but to discover, because everything, you have to know this, everything they discover, they try to control. right? But they can't control what's happening. As it relates to nuclear reactors, with the high particle count that continues to come in, it's going to be a problem cooling off all reactors, all of them. Now, if it's a problem cooling off all the reactors, oh, and by the way, have you guys ever heard of ionized water? Who's heard of that, ionized water? They say it's good for you, right? Right? They say it's good for you. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission says it's bad for you. But the water companies say it's good for you. Because you need to find out what ionization is. That's one of the primary causes of cancer. You just don't know which way it is charged because it affects the human or living cells. Bone decay, teeth problems, right? How many of you, as of late, as of the last 23 years, I hope my numbers are correct, are having an issue with too much wax in your ears? How many? I figured that one out. How many are having a problem with too much wax in their ears? I mean, just too much wax. Like your body is having a problem with something's going on that's strange, right? Too much wax. It just all of a sudden kapoof. Small things like that. Your body is responding to its environment. Now, sometimes it's very tough to trust instruments and even your eyes, but the reactions of your bodies. And you start talking to other people and they're having those issues are increasing. Well, then you have a problem like autism. What's happening with autism? We know that's a neurologically spawned disease. In the traits of the parent, something happened to the parent. Doesn't mean those children are abnormal. That's not what it means. It just simply means their brains function a little differently than ours does. That's all. There's so many things happening, but they're not telling anybody about the nuclear reactors. How about the money they just pour in? They passed a bill to pour in money to the infrastructure which was going to the nuclear reactors, and some dodo canceled it. I'm not talking about Trump or Obama. What I'm saying is they were convinced otherwise. And if we have an inbound particle cluster that comes in, and the devices at the poles don't work, we're in trouble. We're in trouble because the North and South Pole are where the weather portals are, right? And they invited all those leaders because Earth is a little more than what you thought it is. It's not some simple rock sitting out in the middle of nowhere. This Earth is designed inside out. It is designed. And where is Earth? In the middle of space. A perfect biodome is what it is. We call it home, right? And they're playing with it. Nowhere in the Bible says, I will destroy those who destroy the earth. Well, how are they destroying the earth? We're not talking about littering. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about chopping down a few trees to build a home or even a city. Because the way things are, there's a balance here, right? But there are things that the earth can't recover from. And it specifically says in Revelation, God will destroy those who destroy the earth. How are they destroying it? I'll tell you how they're doing that, by taking over its natural processes. And you can do that at the North and the South Poles. In fact, this strange weather phenomena we've been having, right, really began to take hold, slipping through the 70s. Really, going to its height at the 80s. And part of that was because of a magnetar that everybody missed. But then when you got to 2001, everything changed. We punched holes in our own atmosphere with high altitude nuclear explosions. Do you guys know that? We induce things upon this earth with VLF systems and high frequency systems. Do you not know that, I believe it was 1978, some of the smartest people on earth got together and they said we need a high frequency shield. That's what they said. We need a high frequency shield to buy some time so we can get our equipment ready to protect ourselves, right? Because keep in mind, they're trying to save their lives, all right? They're trying to save their lives. They don't want to kill themselves. They have an ego, which means they have to rule over somebody. They're not going to kill everybody. They're trying to save themselves. So, but they said we need a high frequency net around the earth. It just so happens at that time that they were commissioning laboratories, very prestige laboratories. That's when radio communications of any type took off, right? Because while the people were entertaining themselves in what they themselves had provided, which is so funny. You take a bunch of kids in a room who have no toys. Let's say me and Robin make some toys, right? And we give them to the kids in the room. Now they're playing with our toys. Every week we introduce a new toy, right? Over the course of years, these kids grew up 1 year, but we have introduced them to 50,000 toys apiece. They're in competition. They're doing what they do over the toys. But the goal of Robin and I is to get them to participate in an experiment, to somewhat become a useful individual for our experiment. So the toys contained a material, right? A material that is magnetic. Because what Robin and I want to study and what we want to do is to see if we can distribute enough magnets to everybody, would it in fact affect the magnetic field of the school, right? So we hand everybody toys of our makings, just like they hand us computers and Wi-Fi, which is constantly emitting signals, constantly transmitting. And you put all those transmitters together and you have trillions of watts of transmission power leaving the surface of the earth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And no one had to build some big facility that everybody would complain about. So now they spread it all over the face of the earth. Because if you centralize it, no one wants to agree with it. So you get a think tank together and you say, well, how can we get everybody to participate in this experiment? Because we need high frequency waves traveling through the atmosphere or we're all going to die. How do you get people to participate in this? Hey, I know. So you get a lot of philosophers and psychiatrists and behavioral scientists and everybody together, and they discuss the social impact of such an experiment, and they come up with a way. And so each and every individual is inclusive. Do you know it's a federal mandate that people have a cell phone? You didn't even know that, did you? And of course they allow you to run away with stories. If the truth of what they were doing, I mean the absolute truth and the goal of what they were doing was known to a finite degree where people would believe it, you'd only hear from that person a few times and then you would not hear from that person anymore. But you got to think about that. Everybody on the face of this planet is holding multiple pieces of equipment and transmitting trillions of watts every 1 millionth of a second. What do you think that's doing to the planet? What's happening to the planet? Is that not a high frequency shield? But for what? For what? Because each and every one of us has a cell phone. We all know what microwaves do, don't we? We all know that 2.4 gigahertz is the magic frequency. You don't believe me? Look up 2.4 gigahertz. Look up its multiples. Then find out about your cell phone. 2.4 gigahertz is what affects the water molecules in the human body. 2.42 and 2.44 are much more specific. Your neurological system, all biological systems can be affected in that range. And with a small degree of change, there you have it. Now, how does that work? Well, how come everybody didn't fall apart yet? If you take a frequency of 500 hertz and another frequency phased 180 degrees out at 500 hertz, you cancel both out. You cancel them out. To switch it on, you simply begin to alter the phase of one or two devices out of billions. That offset is enough to make anything happen. Microwaves work by affecting water molecules in food and beverages, right? That's how it works. Well, there's something else working on you. I keep trying to explain to you guys, you gentlemen out there, why do you think you sit up sometimes and you start sweating, you get hot, you can't cool down? You're having hot flashes of the unusual kind. And from some of the women that have also experienced this, they say it's worse than normal hot flashes. What about the times you start freezing out of the blue? And it's associated with the ringing of the ears. They say people have tendinitis. Why does tendinitis sound like somebody's playing a high-pitched piano in your ear? Right? And they're going down in scale until it goes out. What's that all about? They're fooling people. This is a byproduct of something you're a participant in. If you had a natural ringing of the ears, you won't have a step down at precise increments in the tone. How can there be a change in tone? So, well, many people by themselves, we disproved that at COT. We did. We had a small device. I believe we did this in 2000. We had a small device. And every time a couple of us had it, every time we would hear that ringing, right? You just press a little button on this thing and it would start receiving any of those high-pitched tones. If it received them, then it's not your ears. You guys remember when the little magnetic recorders, first they began to perfect that? That's what we were using, right? And we want to get rid of all frequencies that could interfere with it. And when you know it, we recorded exactly what we heard in our ears. Not every time. Not every time. Not every time were those high frequency sounds that you hear in your ears recordable, right? But the ones that go dee, 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 we recorded. Those were recorded. We actually recorded that. So if it's tendinitis, if it's something biological, then how can a device record that? So it kind of tells you something, right? If you can record that, but it's not in your head, it's in the air. And your head may be the target, but it's in the air if you can record it. Before that, before everybody started hearing the high-pitched sounds, many people were going crazy by low frequencies. So it's not, this isn't something biological. Don't worry if I mix up the word tinnitus with tendinitis. What I'm saying is that their cover stories are not working because people are getting smarter. One of the mistakes many people we seem to have, and all of us are guilty of this, we try to come up with these explanations, adding another theory out there. That's only confusion, right? Because if I don't know the cause of something, a theory is the last thing we need to complicate the matter. And in most cases, it turns out to be something very simple. So what I'm telling you is this. With a disruption in uranium-235, in the fission process, and the chain reaction moderators of a nuclear reactor, this introduction of high-speed particles is going to start heating up the nuclear material in the reactors. They're going to have to, now you mark my words, they're going to have to change, or you're going to hear about precautions, pump problems. And we're coming to a time where they're going to have to change physics. I hope you know that. That's what it's coming to. Now, it's a known fact that certain constants have already changed, right? Certain rates on the atomic level have already changed. Physics itself is changing because some of the rates, like the rate of decay, is different, right? It's different. Certain calculations right now dealing with electrons is different. Electrons, protons, and neutrons. When you're dealing with electronics, some of the calculations with magnetism are changing. And so they have to go back and change these known constant. A constant is a value that never changes, like pi. That's a constant, 3.1. That's a constant. It does not change. Well, you have a bunch of other constants. And if they start altering and changing, we're in for it. But they're having to do this all the time. So now, all things right now are no longer analog. Have you noticed? Your clocks are not analog, are they? The way you keep time is not analog. If something happened to the consistency of time itself, you'd never know. There's no way you could know. Because everything is digital now. And everything is code now, right? So to change a clock is to do a minute adjustment. If the change in a week is subtle, you'd never know it because everything is digital. How many of you have a crystal clock? It operates by crystal. Because if you do, you're going to find out it's slow, very slow. It's unreliable is what I'm saying. It's not very reliable. And sometimes you have to tweak it. Now if it's a crystal clock, right? That crystal is going to react based upon, let's just say, the main crystal in the earth. But if it's some of those clocks, they operated differently. They operated with a combination of gravity, right? They did gravity, spring tension, things of that nature, right? Mechanical, very mechanical. Those are no good. Mechanical clocks are not going to keep what you need. Some of the manual clocks you think are manual that take a battery, right? It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your old wind-up stuff. How many have those? Because if it takes a battery, chances are it may have a small set of transistors in there. It may have a crystal, right? And if it's crystal operated, that crystal is going to maintain a specific frequency. But if you have a wind-up watch, right? Is it reliable? Or you have to just say yes or no. You set that bad boy and start walking around and watch what happens. Analog devices are no longer reliable. I've noticed that with, how many of you still have VCRs? How many have VCRs, still have VCRs? Because if you still have a VCR, which works by timing, right? Not the newer digital ones, but some of the let's just say mid-range ones, right? And they work off timing too, because everything has to be timed, right? To sync the video with the audio. Yeah, everything does. Any old VHS televisions, or probably nobody has a UHF television, but what you're going to find, if they worked perfectly 17 years ago, and you didn't touch them, they're not going to work too well now because of a change in properties. Everything is digital for a reason. So if any type of known issues with time or anything like that were to happen, you'd never know. You would never know. There are phenomena that are taking place all over the world. And with the advent of digital communications, you can communicate one thing to a person but that communication can be edited. The person's not going to send the exact communication back to you to make you verify, hey, did you send this? Nobody does that. So you send a message, and if the other person halfway understands it, you're going to assume that they have read the message. But the truth is, those messages can be changed before they ever reach the receiver's device. And if they're worded just right, altered just a bit, you're not going to question the original question. And so many things are like this happening. Many things. You can sit side by side so long as you have different IPs and your locators turned off side by side with a person on Facebook. Communicate or get into some of these forums, and what you'll see is that the receiver or the person reading the main screen, you may type one thing and see it on your phone or your device, and the other person may see it, but it's not going to show up the exact same way on another device. Now it depends on who you're going to chat with. And what is that all about? That is computer controlled, a type of error correction. Let's call it that, error correction. Run with an AI system, instant editing of things. It's just like video, right? You could be on a video. Maybe your, I don't know, maybe your toupee fell off or something like that. Do you not know that with real editing, your toupee can fly off? It can take the rendering from a few seconds ago, apply it to the new picture. Nobody would ever know your hair was missing. Live editing. Things are changing fast. People are not going to know until it affects them. And the Lord gave us discernment to see it, and he gave us the Word of God to give us an outcome. And with the outcome that the Word of God gives us, when we trust that, not figure it out. Stop trying to, you can't try to figure that out. Accept it. And then you can find out what's going on now. But if you try to figure it out, you're going to come up with another theory. The last thing we need is a theory. But if we have the truth, yet we don't know how it's going to be applied, you still have the truth. And when certain things take place in the world, you're going to be able to see it. But if you come up with a theory, here's what happens. You read the truth. You came up with a theory. Now you're believing a theory. So when the thing happens that does not match up with the theory, you have forgotten about the original truth, because a theory makes you change the truth. That's what it does. It may sound good, but that may not be what it is at all. You have to think again, this is why the Pharisees couldn't see, they couldn't recognize who Christ was. You wouldn't want to be in that boat, would you? And the Lord said the same way they didn't know who he was, they can't discern you either, but they also would not discern when the Lord was coming. Now, if the world can't discern when the Lord is coming, that means if you are an advocate for the world and its systems and its ways, philosophies, language, and everything else, you're going to miss it too. No wonder he told us to come out of the world, because the world is full of theories. And if you operate your life based upon theories, you're going to forget the truth. The truth will be distorted. That happens with the Word of God all the time. How many of you have seen that in yourselves? You believe something in the Word of God only to find out years later, well, that wasn't true at all. We don't need to do that anymore, because they're doing everything and anything under the sun. One thing we will do once we get everything back set up again, we're going to have an in-depth study on 3 specific studies. One, we're going to do an Enoch Jasher side-to-side study. It needs to be done. Those are some of the most detailed books regarding history. All right? I know that in the King James Version, that's the Torah, is what we have, right? Jasher and Enoch, there's a story behind both of those books. It is. Now, if we do a side-by-side study, now we're going to see some things. We're going to see some things. I mean, a side-by-side study where nobody can fool you or anything else, right? And then that way we can stay centered with the gospel of Jesus Christ, with our gospel studies, because I'm setting up I have portions of a full audio of gospel studies, not what I think about the gospel, but what the Word says. You see, that takes time to set up. Right? It's not something I thought I'd say, hey, I can do that in a couple of weeks. Wrong. I was wrong. Because I've been working on this thing for 2 months. 2 months already. It's a Jasher and Enoch side-by-side study for 2 months. Unlike the other times, I said, wait a minute, I have to have at least 20 chapters done before I ever start the study. Because once you start the study, well, then that's when you're into something. So it's going. But at least, if it's the last thing I can do, we can all look at this together. And we won't have to speculate because they're so black and white, so in your face. There's no there are no parables, really. That's just like the parables in the book of Enoch. Anybody ever read those 2 parables? I read those. They're not parables. It is an amazing thing. They're not parables. We'll pray before we get to those, but the Lord will give you the same understanding he gave me. And I'm sure he gave many other people. It is the story of everything. That's what those 2 parables are. The story of everything. I mean, it is deadly accurate too. Because both books imply there will be a lot of trickery done in the last days. In other words, the populace, their attention would be controlled by those who were in power. They would be put in a trance. That word trance was used. Like a trance. They'd be put in a trance, believing the stories. Most of it would be entertainment and a show, just like it is now. In other words, it wouldn't be real. They would be deceived. The masses would be deceived because they would be entertained with a bunch of drama, just like it is now. They would hope for things that would never come. And they would continue to hope until they died for things that could never come. Lord have mercy. And then you have some proponents out there that say, well, the book of Enoch is not biblical. Yes, it is. There's no contradiction in the book of Enoch and the Torah. None. I've already done that. And with the book of Jasher, already did that. What happens is most often, as you guys can see with COT as we're reading scripture, is that somehow we'll read something, but instantly we change everything to interpret that a different way, and so we're going to work on that. All right? But hey, listen, guys, I got to go, but I want to, because we have to really get ready. We're going to shut down and start early. You guys read the notices at the front of the site for the status in the upper left-hand corner. It's going to give you the status of our site because we have to do this. We've got to shut down. Things are running hot, and we've got to do it. So, but don't panic. We'll try to put some things. Now, you're going to see bunch of offline things on the site from time to time. That means our system is totally shut down. And there's some rewiring and things like that are going to have to happen while we're doing this. I'm not sure of the time frame. So what we'll do is just, that's going to be something we'll handle day by day. I'm not sure of the time frame. That depends on a few factors, right? But we'll get it done. But I'm excited about these studies. But the truth, I tell you, the truth is already there. But we would rather be entertained than to accept the simplicity of God's word. We've got to get out of that. We're looking for big stuff and missing the things we could utilize in our lives already, which leaves us empty, right? Leaves us empty. We need to get to a point where we are fulfilled. We are fulfilled. All right? Well, I'm going to be in and out of the Chatwing chat room. I will be able to access that. All right? But we're going to take COT offline. And you may see it come on and off. We'll keep you updated on there best we can. I'll keep you updated through Chatwing best we can, okay? We'll get it done. We'll get it done. The Lord is always good. So everything happens for a reason, but I can tell you this. If we're doing it here at COT, some of you guys were in the chat room earlier, you know what I'm talking about. If we're doing it, I guarantee you, I can almost guarantee you, it's necessary. But when you think about it, well, that can't be good if it's necessary, right? But it's been a long time coming anyway. Some stuff just happens. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. We just keep trucking and go forward, right? We do. Trust in the Lord always. And let's keep going forward. Keep going forward. All right, guys. You guys will see me in the chat room here shortly. Keep that in mind about these nuclear reactors. See, if you know these things, then you won't panic. You're not going to panic. You're not going to start jumping to conclusions and everything else. You won't do that. But that's a bad thing when you panic, because you're no longer sober. Okay? Stay calm, stay focused. Surely stay sober. And keep going forward. God bless everybody. Let's go offline, right? Let's power down and do what we have to do. I just get the beep. I'm getting kicked off is what they're doing. Are you serious? But it's close to, they're about to start tearing down everything, so we'll see. Maybe we can do it piece by piece and have some functionality. I'm not sure how that's going to work. We're going to go talk about it, so we'll see. God bless you all.